welcome to CityView Inside. I'm your host, Liz Hatch. CityView Inside is a program that provides an opportunity for us to give you, the viewer, a behind-the-scenes look at how the city operates and connects to you, a resident of the city. We'll hear directly from the departments that help keep the city moving and also try our best to keep you informed on happenings in and around Cambridge. Today, we're going to be focusing on women, specifically the work that the Women's Commission has been performing in the city for more than 30 years. Let's start with an introductory clip, and then we'll come right back to speak with Kimberly Sansoucy, the director of the Cambridge Women's Commission.
Part of my job is keeping records of the official actions of the council. So I have lists of public officials going back to the 1800s, and I've got books with records of what they've done going back to the 1600s. And from going through my lists, I can tell you that the first women elected to the school committee were Sarah Sprague Jacobs and Phoebe Mitchell Kendall. They were both first elected to the term that began in 1880. 1880. Wait a minute. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was what gave women the right to vote, and it was not passed until 1920.
Established in 1977, the Women's Commission works to promote equality and justice for all women and girls and advocates on their behalf with other city departments and officials to increase opportunities and develop policies in key areas that significantly affect women and girls. The Commission has consistently developed programs so that women and girls' voices can be heard.
So she didn't talk about her work.
Yeah, she talked about girls and women.
Girls, women, how we carry ourselves,
and how we see
and
in the
about
world.
kids and stuff like that.
And she talked about how nowadays girls like us, when rap videos come on and how they're talking about being hoes and stuff, and how we sit and we don't understand it and we sit and dance to it when it's putting us down.
Yeah, why would we like the music if they're sitting and calling us?
Putting us down.
Was she right? Was she making an assumption?
She was right. She was right. Because some of the music videos do talk about girls being
and in order to be in the video, you have to be a certain way. You have to wear certain clothes, you know.
With annual events that shine a much-needed spotlight on issues ranging from domestic violence, leadership issues, and the importance of girls participating in sports, the Women's Commission will continue to help shape and influence policy in the city.
So Kimberly, thanks so much for joining me today. Welcome to CityView Inside.
Thank you very much for having me.
Anytime.
Glad to be here.
Excited to talk about all the important work you guys are doing. But before we get to that, I want to start a little bit with the history of the Women's Commission. So as we saw in the intro, the commission got established in 1977. You guys have been doing a lot of work since then. Can you give me sort of the broad overview about how it got started and how it's evolved?
I'm happy to. Well, as the introduction said, it was 1977. It was a city ordinance that was passed. It was a time where there was a lot of attention, and rightly so, attention being brought to what women's roles were. It was in sort of the height of the civil rights movement and the women's movement, and thinking the country was at a time of rethinking the way things had been for so many years. Right. And so the Women's Commission was established here in Cambridge, as we said, in 1977. And it's one of, I would say, a few dozen city-based, so a municipal-based Women's Commission. There's about 200 Women's Commissions nationwide. Many of them exist on a statewide level or a countywide level, and then, like I said, there's a few dozen that exist on a city level. Boston has one, Somerville has one, San Francisco has one. Cities of that nature, those sizes, have women's commissions. So our mandate is a fairly broad one, like most women's commissions are. It's meant to be essentially so that we can all work in an inclusive manner to promote equity among women and girls. And so the piece that we really focus on, given that it's a city department, and so we're really looking at the ways that we can help specifically Cambridge women and girls.
Okay. So the few dozen, do you work closely with those based on the city level, or is it more the broad spectrum that you guys find you're working more closely with?
Well, we work very much, the work that the Women's Commission here in Cambridge does is, like I said, sort of very focused. I would say about 80% of the work our office does directly impacts the women and girls of Cambridge. And then, of course, we're also interested in the statewide level and the national level, given that there are things like paid leave, pay equity that are very much being addressed and looked at on the federal level and on the state level. And so there's an association of women's commissions from New England, so I work closely with those directors very much in a sharing best practices way.
Okay.
And then, on a national stage, there's a national conference for women's commissions that convenes, and it's a way, again, for us to all share ideas and practices and what we're all engaged in. But the bulk of my work and the bulk of the work of the Women's Commission is right here in the city.
Okay, so let's talk about that some more. What is, sort of the main goal of the Women's Commission, and what do you do day to day to support that?
Well, day to day, what we do is we're really looking to advance women and girls, and particularly we're looking at marginalized communities within Cambridge.
Okay.
So what that translates, one of the things I love about my job is what that translates to is that every day is different, and that what we're looking at is developing programs and connecting and collaborating with other departments and other local nonprofits and individuals to, as well as schools, et cetera, to be able to actually take the programs that we're working on and collaborating with and put them out and in the field and in the city. And what we're doing on the, in terms of the public education piece, we also do a lot of programming that is, for instance, we might screen a film. We also have various programs that, for instance, Girls Sports Day, where we're really connecting to a very tangible goal along with working with the program. So those are the kinds of things every day. Like it really does it really is it's sort of how we plan out our year, but also how we respond. So if there's something that comes up that's unexpected that we need to respond to, one example to give you, which helps to give an overview of the way in which we there's so many things that we can plan for, and then because we're government, there's some things that we can't plan for and we need to be responsive. Several years ago, there was an incident of domestic violence against two very popular singers, and so there were a lot of kids who were really impacted and concerned and had their opinions about what had happened and why it had happened. And so I actually had a lot of a lot of teachers calling our office and parents and others who were and after school youth workers saying, how do we have a good dialogue about this incident? It's all the kids know about it. They're all talking about it. They're all forming their opinions on what they think about domestic violence and how these things happen, and we'd love to, use this opportunity. And so, that's an example of something where we had to just jump right in and happily help out and think about and strategize about how to put in place things for the community to be able to respond to appropriately to the children who are asking all of these questions.
Right, yeah, very important. So sort of keeping in line with that, so why is it so important to have the Women's Commission in Cambridge?
Well, I think it's one of those things where, for me, if we think about the organizing force that gender is in our society, if you think about, friends or people who have a baby, one of the first questions that you're asked is, was it a boy? Was it a girl? What did you have? And so right from the start, there's this question about, and there's this idea about gender, and that idea that prescription, the things that we apply to what that means. What does it mean if you had a girl? What does it mean if you had a boy? Right. We all bring those notions and those ideas that are very, very ingrained in us, but they're also they're something they're ingrained culturally. They're not a characteristic the way in which, something like, we all have an arm and we can't really dispute that this is what we do with an arm. Yeah. But we can dispute and discover and disguise and lie about and stereotype and do all kinds of things when it comes to gender. So when we start with that and think about that as an organizing force, and many people would say, well, gender is an organizing force, but isn't race and isn't class and aren't all these other pieces? And I would agree wholeheartedly that yes, those things are also organizing forces. And so why we really want to have or think about having a women's commission is that because it's really about taking something, when we look at what disparity really is. So there's disparity between the sexes, and that disparity equals or translates into basically power and status. And so one of the things that we know, because we're all members of this society and to varying degrees do we ascribe to it or not, that women and girls do not have the same power and status that men do. And so we need to think about how, especially as a government department, as government and as a city department, how we think about and how we address that disparity, and how we provide services and how we provide education and how we provide outreach and all of those things to lessen that disparity and how we think about that division between men and women, girls and boys.
Right, absolutely. So what are some of the services that you provide to women and girls of Cambridge?
Well, so I did bring some cue cards here because there's so
much.
There's so many, and we have only a certain amount of time, which I'm grateful for. But
but there's so much to learn.
Yeah, but I'm happy to talk about things and I think one of the things that's more interesting, especially in a program like this, is to really sort of talk about the events that we are part of and the events that we collaborate on and with others, because it gives a sense of the sort of something that we're actually doing and the things that people can participate in and come to and see.
Yeah.
So a lot of the examples that I have are just that. One of the things that I did want to talk about is an upcoming event, if I can find it here, which is our Women in Words event, which will be the first Thursday in September. Okay. And we do them quarterly. Yep. And Women in Words was really started to be a conversation, a facilitated conversation, a discussion through a feminist lens around a particular topic. And so the topics are extremely varied, and very much just whatever the feeling of relevance at the time that we host these.
Makes sense.
And we host them right at 344 Broadway, in the second floor conference room from 7 to 8:30 on the first Thursdays of every quarter. So coming up in September, we are going to be having a conversation talking about women, blogging, and food. Okay. And we're going to have Jackie Morrissey, who is the head of PR for Rialto. And she also, which is right here in Harvard Square, and she also has her own blog, her own food blog. Yeah. And so she's going to come and lead a facilitated discussion, and we're going to have that conversation. A lot of, like I said, we've had various topics. I mean, everything from fourth trimester, what's now termed the fourth trimester of pregnancy, to discussion about women graffiti artists, to when Our Bodies Ourselves launched their 40th anniversary edition. They came and we had that discussion. So it's a varied.
So how do you choose the topics? Do you choose them? Is it a commission vote or?
It's usually by a committee. We have a conversation, we have a discussion, and we have things that actually feel like it's either that that's drifting up, that people are sort of asking for or saying like, oh, I'd really love to know about that. Or sometimes it's somebody that actually comes to us and says, we're putting together this book. We think it would be really an interesting topic. We want to hear from people in the community. We want to have this conversation. So it's it gets there through various ways. But one thing that people can do is definitely go to our website at Cambridge Women's Commission, all one word, .org.
Okay.
And they're on the website in events, they would be able to see and find when we would be having upcoming Women in Words events, or any of our events actually. And there's also a place there they can like us on Facebook, and they can also sign up for our mailing list, which will then just give them an email when we're doing something that they might be interested in.
Okay. So I want to go back to something you said that was kind of interesting. The 4th trimester, that's something new to me. Can you kind of briefly update me about what was spoken about?
Sure. We had this, we had a wonderful woman. She is a doula and a childbirth expert, and she, so we typically think of pregnancy as 3 trimesters, in 3 parts.
Yep.
And that the 4th trimester, as it's being called, is really something where, after birth, the baby truly is so essentially still undeveloped in so many ways. Their digestive system, their sleep, all of these things are still very much in process.
Right.
And so there's that very sort of overwhelming, delicate, joyful, beautiful time of those first 3 months after birth, where, also for the mom, her body, if she's given birth, her body is going back into stages after pregnancy. And so there's so many pieces in which her body is returning to its pre-pregnancy state. It's, the hormones, all those things, if she's choosing to breastfeed, what all of those things mean. And so it's a way for us to think about this time really, besides just the joy of welcoming a new child, that there's also a tremendous amount of it's very overwhelming.
Yes.
It's incredibly overwhelming.
It's a big job.
And often those conversations don't happen at the at the shower, at the baby shower, or when the cute outfits roll in. It's not the thinking about the spit up or whatever's going to be happening to these cute outfits in these first 3 months.
Yeah.
So it was that conversation that we had, and what that really, how that can help women really think about their own, sort of normalizing that time, and how difficult that time can be, and how often that's really not talked about.
Right.
And so that was really what we were looking to do, is to have that facilitated conversation, so that women really sort of have a better sense of that 4th trimester, that there's still sort of a lot of work to do with the infant and with you as the new mom.
Absolutely. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
Learned a new term today.
Yes.
That's cool. So if somebody wants to see one of these Women in Words events come to life, where can they sort of express their ideas and hopes?
Oh, well, I mean, one of the things they could do is absolutely just call our office, 617-349-4697.
Okay.
And, we could absolutely, we're happy to hear from residents. I mean, that's really what our main goal is to be responsive in so much of the way in which we devise and think about programming, and think about our collaboration with other departments, and like I said, other even, private nonprofits in the city, that we really are coming at it from what we see as, what we hear as what the requests are, what people are asking for, where we see the need. And it's very much a back and forth. We are not, sort of setting our agenda separately from how we see the benefits to the residents. That it's a much more collaborative piece.
Right. That's great to know. Good. So people can call in.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you work with other nonprofits in the area. What are some of the ones that you work with more closely? Do you support any? Do any support you? What are those relationships like?
Well, I mean, I guess I could pick and use it as an example, an initiative that we've been involved with, that the city has been involved with and very committed with, and other and our local nonprofits have been committed with, and that is the what is now the Gender-Based Violence Initiative. And this was really born out of about 3 years ago. The then Councilor Marjorie Decker, now state rep, was concerned about domestic violence and what government's role was in domestic violence, obviously as it related to Cambridge, and what we were doing as a community. And she met closely with Risa Mednick from Transition House, the executive director of Transition House, and that started the ball rolling to look at and start to investigate, what what are the services currently in existence in the city, and what are things that, may need some help, and also how can we think about this from a perspective of really building awareness. And certainly the city has had a long history of being very involved, invested in the prevention of domestic violence. And this was really to renew that. And so we began the Women's Commission along with other city departments, the Public Health Department, and along with other nonprofits, CASPAR, Emerge, and others, started meeting and began to think about having a campaign, an awareness building campaign, which was, again, this was now going back 3 years. And that campaign then turned into some community summits and community meetings where we invited input from the community. So we were really asking questions like, what is domestic violence? What does that mean to you? And how, and it was a wonderful opportunity for the city leadership and all of us here in the city to really hear about and learn about where the community was in its relation to domestic violence. And because it's such a taboo subject and such a difficult subject and such a personal subject, that it was really something that helped to then, now here we are, 3 years later, catapult us into the city leadership, led by the city manager, is now going to hire a position, a gender-based violence coordinator, who is going to set to come on board sometime in September in order to create a more sort of cross-sector, with not just the nonprofits, but also with the city side, with the hospital, with the public health department. So we have been working with Transition House, as an example, and folks from Emerge, which is a batterers intervention. And Transition House, for those who may not be familiar, is Cambridge's domestic violence shelter. So that's who we've been recently working with, or that's an example of some local nonprofits that we have worked closely with, along with other city departments, to sort of usher in this new position, and then hopefully this new approach and awareness building within the city for residents. And so that's something that we're really looking forward to, its launch.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting. So I'm sure you guys will be working very closely with that person when they do come on board.
Excuse me, yes.
So one of the things I do want to ask you is, how does the Women's Commission give girls and women a voice in the city?
Well, I think mainly one of the things that we really do try to do is we try to be at the table. It's an often used phrase, but we do try to be at the table for these kinds of discussions that happen, that are places where you wouldn't even perhaps necessarily think that, that this issue is something that, women's voice in particular need to be represented. Just as an example, thinking about bullying. When a few years ago the state responded to a very unfortunate incident of bullying where the young girl from Western Mass actually took her life. And so the state responded with new bullying guidelines and wanted to have all school districts be compliant. And so our school district actually was fairly ahead of the standards, but we still needed to do our due diligence, and we needed to make sure that we were up to speed on everything and being responsive. And there's lots of pieces to the puzzle, and so there were lots of conversations around what that meant. And one of the things that I always think is important to have on those conversations is the gender piece. That bullying is often a gendered, the way in which bullying plays itself out often has a gendered bias to it. In other words, we imagine, and we're often right, at least statistically, that bullying, the way girls bully and the way boys bully are actually fairly different. And to not have that conversation be really important, be really present in what our response to bullying is, and to not have that be part of the makeup of how we think about it and how we prevent it and how we have conversations as a community beyond just the schoolyard, but in our homes, and to our own children. Those things are very important, and it's really important to have the piece of gender in that and how bullying can very much be genderized in its approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So when those newer initiatives came down from the state, the newer guidelines, I should say, was there a specific event where all the Cambridge girls got together and you guys talked about it?
No,
or?
this wasn't. This was very much about how the school system, how the school department was going to just be certain that they were on top of what these new guidelines were. And like I said, we were already fairly ahead of what the state was mandating. So we were there, but we just needed. We just needed to convene, and they were convened by the school department and many other, the police department and many other after-school programs. So there was a lot of, a broad reach, even, the athletic department, so a broad reach into city departments. They were all represented, but that's just an example of one way in which, bringing the voices of women and girls and having an understanding of the way in which gender actually really plays a huge role in how bullying gets carried out. It's just one example.
Yeah. So keeping in line with the school department a little bit, I want to talk about the 5th grade Girls Sports Day.
Oh, sure.
So this year was the 17th annual?
Exactly. Yes.
How did it go this year?
Well, we were grateful for your help, your volunteer help.
It's a great day.
And it's one of these things that now that it's been 17 years, that it's really become quite a beloved event, and people look forward to it. And when it started 17 years ago, it started really as a result of all the research that was coming out at that time about what it is for girls to play sports, what it is for girls to have time to be able to do these things on their own. And to create that space and how that actually reduced things like obesity, smoking, teenage pregnancy, those kinds of decisions that girls were going to be making if we started them at that time of 5th grade.
Right.
And if we were introducing them to activities, physical activity, but also sports. So Girls Sports Day, it also just incorporates and includes other physical activities. I mean, we do things like ride bikes. Aside from volleyball and softball and basketball, and we have golf and we've done rollerblading, and so we have various activities that girls, in a very non-competitive way, can do. So it's at Danahy Park, and we've always had good weather, and it's just a really wonderful, special day for the girls to come out and spend all that time together, trying out these different activities.
Yeah. Well, I had a great time doing it too. So. All right, so before we close, is there anything else that you think I forgot that you'd like to add?
Well, no, I think we've said how to get in touch with us. I can say it again, 617-349-4697. We're happy to hear from folks, their ideas and their thoughts. Again, we see our office and our role to be very much an advocacy role and working with residents and working with the community and collaborating.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, Kimberly. I really learned a lot, and I hope you will come back soon and keep us up to date.
I'm happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to find out more information on some of the topics we touched on, please check out the city's website at www.cambridgema.gov. For broadcast schedule information, you can check the 22 CityView website at www.cambridgema.gov/22CityView. For the staff at 22 CityView, I'm Liz Hatch. Good night, and thanks for watching.